Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game and is doing our first ever 3pm record. I'm Kevin Day and he's Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, it seems appropriate, Kieran, especially for two men of our age, that we're actually doing a 3 o'clock kickoff.
Yes, it's wonderful in a way because I can't actually remember the last 3 o'clock kickoff I've been to see at the Amex ground, so this is the nearest I've been to it.
Yeah, so I can't remember the last 3 o'clock kickoff I was at, but that's because I drink too much after the game, basically. Speaking of which, the only dilemma doing it at 3 o'clock has given me is that, is it too early for a glass of wine? And I decided, Kieran, even though it's still technically the Christmas holidays, I've gone for a cup of tea. Oh, which is very mature of me, very professional. It is my job, technically, so I really should not be drinking while we're doing it. And also, I think it's going to be a fairly short pod, so I'm confident that it won't be that long for me to wait. Not many stories this week, Kieran, in the first week of the new year, but the first one is a big one, Kieran. Southampton have new owners. Who are they and how much have they paid?
It's a Serbian media mogul who has who's set up a company. Now, we're getting a variety of stories as to how much they've actually paid. This company has raised £100 million, and it's the existing majority owner, a Chinese gentleman, Chinese businessman called Mr. Gao. He bought Southampton for £208 million a few years ago. The press are reporting that he sold it for 100. So it looks like that's quite a severe loss. But I've had some messages from people who are a bit ITK who seem to think he's actually got a bit more than that. So it looks like it's a minimum of 100, but on top of that, it looks like the new owner is also taking on the debt of the club, and Southampton borrowed £80 million from this boutique lender called MSD Holdings, which has connections to the computer dude Michael Dell, and they're paying a lot of interest. So they're paying interest at over 9% on that. So if you add all the numbers together and start getting very geeky with a spreadsheet, I think we're probably talking around about 230 million by the time you factor in all the costs. But so I still think the owner will take a loss, but not the extent of the loss that's being reported.
Ironically, I didn't know what ITK meant. I had to Google it very quickly. So, in the know, it's not one I've come across before. So, have they acquired, the new owners have acquired all of the club?
No, they've acquired 80%. I think the other 20% is owned by the daughter of the former owner. I think her name is Catherine Liebherr, and she's of Swiss nationality. She owns 20%, but doesn't really have an involvement. The Chinese businessman who did own the club, he's been there about 4 or 5 years. He's not put a penny into Southampton, and he's not taken a penny out either, trying to work out his motives, and he doesn't speak English, and that's not a criticism. I don't speak Mandarin, so I don't think we should be sniffy towards him just because of that. But therefore, I think communication was not great between the club and the fan base as to his ambitions and aims. And I've heard rumours that he's been trying to sell the club for a significant period of time, and I think he's taken the view that whilst he's lost a bit of money from this, Southampton's probably losing money on a day-to-day basis, so it allows him to cut his losses.
Two things, Kieran. I don't know whether it's significant, but I noticed yesterday that the new owners, that their initial statement talked about they've been looking for a sports club, which I thought was interesting, rather than football club, for quite some time, and Southampton is the one that fits their criteria. Do you know what criteria they would be talking about? Why is Southampton a good buy for these people when they're implying that they've been looking at other clubs for quite some time?
Well, I think it's a case of getting the price right. and also having a club which is familiar with a development model. I think it's noticeable that one of the people who has come on board has just recently left Brentford, and what Brentford have achieved is absolutely fantastic. But theirs is very much this Moneyball approach to football, in which they use analytics and metrics and algorithms to identify players who are being undervalued in the market, but also whose skills would fit in well with English football. Because you're a good footballer doesn't mean that you're going to your particular skill set's going to work in every division and in every league. So he's come on board with this, and it also seems that that the new owners are looking for a multi-club ownership model, whereby I don't think this will be their only football club. And the advantage of that is that if you own 4, 5, 6 clubs, if one of them gets relegated, it's not ideal, but you've still got the certainty of money coming in from the other. If you just own one football club and that gets relegated, especially if it's in the Premier League, you've got a huge financial shock to have to deal with. So I think they want to build up a series of football clubs. And there are, we've discussed this before, the advantage of having clubs in Europe is that you can recruit players at 16 and 17, which you can't now do in the Premier League or the EFL post-Brexit. So you've therefore got, you use these overseas clubs as holding areas.
It was a quiet day on Sky Sports yesterday, Kieran. Not a lot of transfer news, mainly because every agent in the world is busy sending videos to Newcastle trying to offload their donkeys, essentially. So this was the big story all over Sky yesterday. And they reported it every half hour. This is fantastic news for Southampton fans. This is the best news Southampton fans could ever hear. This is a great late Christmas present for Southampton fans. Is it fantastic news for them, Kieran?
No, I saw some of those reports as well, and I thought that they were a bit over-egging the pudding, because there's no evidence that the new owners want to inject additional funds into the football club. This new company, which I've forgotten the name of offhand, it's raised £100 million, but that money has gone straight to Mr. Gow. So whether they're going to try to do something similar to what we've seen at Burnley, which is, again, relatively new owners who are going to try to be smarter than the rest of the Premier League and to use that as a vehicle to be successful. Whereas, let's be honest, as football fans, we're all looking for quick fixes. In the sense of, we want the £30 million guaranteed 20 goal a season striker that everybody else wants, of course. So I'm not sure that Southampton fans will be overjoyed. There were no signs of them, wearing Serbian headwear in the dock area, the dock area of Southampton is quite an interesting place to go, because I remember when we went on cricket tour there, and I was rooming with my legendary roommate, the Prowler, and he took me on a tour of Southampton docks at midnight, which was an eye-opener. I'll say no more than that.
Yeah, I will merely pause to say, Kieran, that headwear shouldn't really be worn in the dock area. Probably in the head area rather than the dock area. I've been to Southampton docks, not at midnight. How you ended up rooming with the Prowler, I don't know, Kieran, but there can't be many reasons why you go to Southampton docks at midnight. Now, if we'd recorded this at 1 o'clock today, Kieran, or 11 o'clock today, this story, I believe, would already be out of date, because I'm told, mainly by a tweet from you, which is generally my source, that there's been a very last-minute development, because the story that Guy sent this morning, the board of Coventry United ladies have decided to end the club. Now, my question was going to be why, but I understand there has been a late development.
Yes. On the 23rd of December, the owners of Coventry United ladies team announced that they were putting the club into voluntary liquidation. This came as quite a shock to the team, to the management, and everybody else. That they were in their first season in the Championship. They were originally planning this season to turn professional on a full-time basis, and that had been deferred because of restrictions due to COVID and the amount of money that the club was just struggling to generate compared to having a normal season. And it really hit everybody because the club had developed. It's had an up and down history in terms of it was playing at the Rico or planning to play at the Rico, and then when Wasps came along, they effectively got evicted. Their most recent accounts, they even had an audit. And as we've discussed, many football clubs in the EFL, they're not audited, but the auditors were happy. And then it all went very sour. I think the players weren't therefore paid for December, which is very distressing. And what we have seen, the liquidation was due to officially be signed off, and this is sort of traditional sort of accounting speak. It would have officially gone through at 11:59 p.m. on the 4th of January, which in effect tends to be 5 p.m. because that's when everybody knocks off work. Right. But at 4:52 p.m., a guy called Lewis Taylor, who runs an energy company, and he also sponsors Wolves women's team. He's come in, and this is if Southampton fans are indifferent as to about the new owners, this anybody that's involved with Coventry United, this does look excellent news. He's come in, he's negotiated a deal with the accountants who were processing the liquidation. It looks like he's going to put in somewhere between 200 to 250k, and fingers crossed, Coventry United will be able to fulfil their fixtures for this season, which I think is good for the integrity of the WSL in terms of the Championship, and will also allow the club to sort of create a pathway forwards.
So I misread your tweet, and if we were recording this yesterday at 1 o'clock, it would have been old news. But
yes,
it's still close. Well, that is good news. We'll be taking a proper in-depth look at the finances of women's football next week. So we have a guest on from Clapton Ladies, who are currently very angry about the distribution of money in football between the men and women's games. So that should be interesting. And talking of accounts, Chelsea and West Ham have just published their latest accounts. Anything of interest in there?
Chelsea got to the FA Cup final, qualified for the Champions League, won the Champions League. You think that's a pretty impressive season. And I'm sure Roman Abramovich is delighted. However, what he had to do, effectively, every single day of the 2020-21 season, he had to write out a cheque for £427,000 to keep the club afloat.
Every day?
Every day. Chelsea lost. They lost around about, I think it was 156 million. He has a company called Camberley International Investments, which effectively plugs the losses in another one of his companies, which owns Chelsea. That company is owed over 1.5 million. But to lose 427 grand a day for what we consider to be one of the most successful football clubs, it's certainly this century. Since Abramovich has come into football, it's won the Champions League twice. It's won the Premier League. It's been regular cup winners, and I think it's indicative of the different mindsets that we have within football. In that, he won't be happy doing that, but he won't be unhappy because he's won the Champions League. Yeah. And this is what we refer to as a trophy asset, where you buy into something or a company with the aim of getting some form of reward from it, which is not financial. And of course, that's up against the likes of FSG at Liverpool and the Glazers at Manchester United, whose sole aim is just to make money.
And what about West Ham?
In terms of West Ham, that they, compared to Chelsea, they had a great year. They only lost £500,000 a week.
Oh, that's right.
Their revenue was up. Their wages were static. So again, West Ham had a decent season last year, but to still lose £27 million is crazy. And yes, we have to take into consideration COVID. And without COVID, I suspect they would have come a lot closer to breaking even. I think one of the things which will irk West Ham fans, although the relations between the fan base and the board have become slightly more entente cordiale, is that Messrs Gold and Sullivan are still charging interests on their loans, and if you take a look at the period since they've acquired the club, they've charged West Ham £22.5 million in loan interest. Now that's not excessive. Manchester United have paid over 800, for example, but it does annoy the fans because if as the owners claim, we are West Ham fans through and through, and you've got owners at Palace, they've lent the club money interest free. I support Brighton. We've got an owner lent money interest free. We've seen the same at Leicester. We've seen the same at many other clubs. This does stand out a bit, and I think it causes a bit of bad blood. David Gold and David Sullivan are successful in their own right, outside of West Ham, and I think this is a bit of an own goal, really. They'll argue that it's cheaper than borrowing from a bank, so the club's benefited and they benefit as well. But that appears to be the one area which West Ham fans are unhappy with. On the pitch, of course, they're absolutely delighted. They're having a fantastic season.
Well, that's the rub, isn't it? If they were in the bottom four, they'd be really angry with Gold and Sullivan, wouldn't they?
Yes.
It's like our mutual friend Mark Webster always said a couple of years ago when West Ham fans were moaning about the new stadium. He said, as soon as we're in the top four, this will be the best stadium in the world, and it is at the moment. Now, this next story, Kieran, is about my club, Crystal Palace, and what amazes me about this is that I knew nothing about it, and that's astonishing because, as you know, I'm on several WhatsApp groups. And one of them will ping and go, my sources are telling me that Wilf Zaha dropped his toast at training this morning. And then another WhatsApp group will go, yeah, butter side down is what I heard. So you hear a lot of stories coming out of Crystal Palace from fans. I don't know how. Martin Kelly's driver seems to be quite talkative by the sound of things. But this is a story that I checked with friends as well this morning, and none of them had heard this story, but Palace, it seems, have taken out a loan secured on Selhurst and other properties. Now, I assume the other property would be the academy, which has only just been built.
That's right. It is the property assets of Crystal Palace. And the first thing to say is there is absolutely nothing wrong with this. And as a Palace fan, I wouldn't be getting worried. Many clubs are borrowing money, and we've seen Sheffield United do the same recently in the last week or so. But it is increasingly common that football clubs are going to non-standard lenders, i.e. sort of the boutique lenders here. Yeah. And they're saying, we've got money coming in. We've got guaranteed money in terms of broadcast money. Potentially, we've got money coming in respect of transfer dealings and so on. And we've got a bit of a cash flow issue because the nature of football is that it's your money coming in is lumpy. We were in discussion before. You do freelance work, I do freelance work, and it's money. Sometimes you have good months, sometimes you have bad months. It's exactly the same for a football club. They get a large amount of money coming in June/July because they get their first tranche of money from the Premier League TV deal. They get a large amount of money when fans are renewing season tickets. If they sell a player, they will normally get a significant amount of the transfer fee at that date as well. And then they might be getting an instalment. So the money coming in is lumpy. The money going out is fairly constant. The biggest cost is going to be your wages, and your wage bill has to be paid each month. So that's what Palace have done, and trying to work out who the lender is. It comes up as MGG Lux Waterford 1 SARL. So if you sort of hunt that down, I don't think it's the Parsons Arms address, sadly. So
it could for tax reasons, Kieran, it could well be the Parsons Arms address series. Kieran, this is an interesting one for me, and it's easy to say don't be worried, but I'm a Palace fan, so my default setting is worried. Although maybe I could go to Steve Parish and say my January, February is looking a bit lumpy. I hear you've had some money in. Could you see me through to May? But what's interesting as well, and a couple of Palace fans I spoke to this morning, is that we've just had a new investor in John Textor who's just come in and put a lot of money into the club. So it would seem odd that we're suddenly asking for more money, and that's the slight worry. And then, of course, people start to put, because Textor's just invested in Boa Vista, I believe, a Portuguese club. So you wonder whether it's anything to do with that. So, but you think it's always going to be a cash flow loan, basically.
Yeah, it looks to me like working capital. There's nothing specific in it in terms of the amount or the interest rate. There's very few details,
right?
Which from my point of view as a nerd is frustrating, because I like to know just how much each club owes at any one point in time. But there's no obligation to show that information. So I don't think. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Again, putting two and two together, is this part of the opportunity to get sort of spades in the ground in terms of the development of Selhurst? That might be going forwards. I know some other fans have been in contact with me to say, Conor Gallagher, is this a deposit for him? I think that's unlikely. I'd be surprised if Chelsea will let him go. Given that they're a club in constant flux, to put it mildly. But my gut reaction is that it's working capital requirements. I think the timing of it, the 22nd of December, probably sort of made some people scratch a few heads. As you say, there has been money put in from John Textor. He's now the largest shareholder at Palace, if the rumours are correct. And this is a classic case of a club could simply say, put something up on the website. This is what we've done. This is why we've done it.
Yeah,
and everybody goes home happy. And this is something I don't understand about football clubs, because it is relatively easy to deal with by being transparent and being upfront.
Yeah, although having said that, I didn't know. I'm guessing 99% of Palace fans probably wouldn't be aware that this happened anyway, would trot along in blissful ignorance. And amazingly, Kieran, having only just learnt the expression ITK, when it comes to Conor Gallagher, I am ITK. Oh. And I will predict with 99.9% certainty that we will not be buying Conor Gallagher. Those Palace fans who think that he's on the way to the club, I don't think he is, unfortunately, but I'm fairly certain it's not going to happen now. The next story, Kieran, it almost beggars belief. To be perfectly honest, the EFL have scrapped COVID testing on match days for players to try and prevent more games being postponed. I mean, that's Alice in Wonderland, Boris Johnson logic right there, because they haven't tested positive, so they haven't got it, so they can play football. Aha! This is not. I mean, this is a sort of thing that somebody might do on New Year's Eve. Think, I'm not going to take a lateral flow test. I might not be able to go out to a party, but. This is bigger than that, Kieran. This is strange.
It is. To a certain extent, I think the EFL are damned if they do and damned if they don't, because there have been an awful lot of matches postponed. Some matches have been postponed at 2 or 3 hours' notice, where you got fans. Given the nature of we are football fans, and we will be we'll have planned it in advance, but you'd have contingencies. There is nothing more irritating than being halfway up a motorway or a train, and you hear the match is off. Although that can sometimes be one of the best days out of the season, because you say, "Oh, sod this for a game of soldiers." where are we? We'll get off the train now. We'll go and find the nearest football match, go to the local pub, and you have a fantastic time. I remember when we had a match called off at Blackburn, so we went to Accrington. It was just a great day out. And also none of the stress of having to watch your own team play. So you get the best of both worlds. But it does seem a bit strange. It's a bit like saying, that there's been a reduction in drink driving. Because we're not going to breathalyze people. And you go, that's not. I think it's not quite dealing with the issue. And I know that some managers, for example, Neil Critchley, who is the coach at Blackpool, he said, we were down in and I think we have to pay Harry Redknapp a royalty. We were down to the bare bones, but we just had enough players to play a match. And Blackpool do have a small squad; they're in the Championship, and he thinks that some clubs are, should we say, manipulating the rules because the EFL can't test the individual players themselves to see whether they've tested positive for COVID. So therefore, they've got to rely on the reports that are coming in. And as Neil Critchley said, we're now left in this crazy situation whereby we are testing footballers for COVID 6 days out of 7. But on the 7th day when the match is taking place, we're pretending that COVID's a non-issue. And it just seems to be a very strange thing. So I think the EFL are desperate to play matches. I think we've just heard that the Liverpool versus Arsenal FA League Cup semi-final, first leg's now being called off with a few hours to go. That's a big earner for the EFL, so they're going to be disappointed from that. It's being, but ultimately it's being driven by money because if matches have to be postponed, you've paid for the catering, you've paid for the stewards, you've paid for this, that, and the other, and you've got to incur these fixed costs.
Yeah, and I feel honour bound, or rather, I can hear the voice of producer guy in my head saying, "Please say this." That the fact that you had Harry Redknapp at the start of one very long sentence, and the phrase "manipulating the rules" at the end of that same sentence, does not imply in any way, shape, or form that those two are linked. Sheer coincidence. And our final story, Kieran. Again, this is one every single football fan listening to this will go, "Ha, told you." I suspect 90% of them will rush into their partners and say, "I told you," and their partner will go, "Oh, for God's sake, not this again." But it's been shown this season, Kieran, in the Premier League, the ball has been in play for an average of 54 minutes per game. We're not getting our money's worth, Kieran.
We're not getting our money's worth because it's decreasing. It's gone down from around about 57 a few years ago, and this appears to be part of a longer term trend. Now, we pay top dollar to watch football, and we don't object too much because ultimately we can walk away. But a combination of goal celebrations. Jesus Christ, they're taking a lot of time. Jeez. If I was watching Manchester City who are scoring 6 or 7 a match, I'm going, hold on, how much football am I actually watching here? So goal celebrations, we know now that if you watch a player who's taking a corner, he gets out a compass to measure how far the ball is next to the quadrangle, and before putting it down. And things are taking longer and longer. And this is part of an ongoing trend. There are some clubs who I won't name, who appear to be playing less football than others, up to sort of 6 or 7 minutes per game on a regular basis, because their strategy is to if you're defending, when you kick it out, you don't just kick it out, you wallop it out. And sometimes ball boys at individual clubs appear to be trained to just sit on those little stools of theirs and watch the ball bobble by and not actually be ball boys. There's a lot of strategy going into this, but there is a solution. And this was something that was put forward by IFAB, the FIFA body, which is looking to continually develop rules, and they came out with this 3 or 4 years ago. And at the time, I thought it was a really sensible idea. Is that first of all, you take away the referee's responsibility for timekeeping. And then you have an official timekeeper, and we play 60 minutes of football. So we're going to see more football, and you take away the incentive for players to time waste, because the official timekeeper, if you are a goal celebration, he or she will just stop the clock, and the fans will see the clock being stopped as well. So it's and if you've watched some of the American franchise sports, watching the timer go down is part of the enjoyment of the game. And to have two 30-minute periods, so you'll end up seeing more football, but B, taking away the incentive of clubs or of players, and they are coached to do this, by the way, of taking away the incentive to time waste, because it is frustrating. I've said, I think on more one occasions on the show, nothing irritates me more, even if it's from my team or the opposition, of the player that takes the ball to the corner flag, and then you get that fanning around. I think that again, a rule should be introduced there. You can just kick him up the arse and play on.
That's all right if you're 1-0 up with 30 seconds to go. That's where you expect your players to take the ball, Kieran. It's proper game management, and I'm going to pretend I didn't hear you say that about two 30-minute. You'll be wanting 4 quarters next.
Oh no.
It's just too hard. Oh, fair enough. All right. And it's quadrant, Kieran, not quadrangle, unless it's the in-house, unless it's the Eton in-house soccer match. But you're quite right. Our Christmas game against Norwich, the referee, I think it's Paul Tierney. I know it's John Moss who was the VAR ref. So Paul Tierney's mic equipment went down, possibly because he didn't want John Moss's voice in his head any longer than his strangely high voice, probably talking about his record shop, which is the Vinyl Whistle, which is it? Yeah, he's got a record shop called the Vinyl Whistle.
Oh wow,
it's worth it just for the name.
Yes.
But Roy, who I was sitting next to, because he's got some qualities that you have, he timed it, and it was between 7 and 8 minutes. The time it took to replace the microphone, during which time we were all saying, Norwich are going to score, and there's time added on for this. Norwich will definitely score. This is an outrage. And then there are a couple of other injuries, so there should have been 10 minutes added on. 3.
Yes.
It was only half the time that we were watching him fanning about with his microphone. So it is an issue, but it's always been an issue. It's been from time immemorial. People say, I'm not getting my money's worth here. It's like, you've only paid £1. You're watching Tooting the Mitcham. Stop moaning. It's like, and on that upbeat note, if you'd like to make a small donation or contribution to our always free to air podcast, then please go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question for our Monday questions pod, then please email them to questions@priceoffootball.com. And in the meantime, I shall hand you over for the customary farewell of Mr. Kieran Maguire.
Well, once again, folks, thanks for the feedback. Thanks for the support. We do appreciate it. Patreon is one method of doing that, for as little as £1 a month as well. But you don't have to do that. If you just want to give us some good karma, all that you have to do is to go to your Google Podcast app or your Apple Podcast app and give a review. And if you'd like us to give us 5 stars, that's fantastic. We're always appreciative of it. It helps us in the charts. It helps us to have some credibility, which when you've got 2 half-assed blokes from South London hosting a pod is something which is probably lacking in some way. But it doesn't matter what you say on the reviews. You could say that you'd rather have it hosted by Shemaima Begum and Tommy Robinson. I'm not sure what the ratings would happen to that show. They'd either go one way or the other. I'm not sure I'd listen to it myself, if truth be told. But you can write whatever you want. If you give us the stars, apparently it's the stars which go into the algorithm and not the comments, because otherwise it would be very, very surreal.
That is your most random one yet. The randomizer has come up with a cracker there. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.